I tried to catch up on Illinois by listening to Bret Bielema give his
Yeah.
post-game comments, and I got to say, I give me some Bret Bielema. I can listen to the guy all day. Usually has some very interesting things to say. I've always admired Bret Bielema. Thought he got a raw deal at Arkansas, but he gave the standard lines. Everybody's progressing. Everybody's developing. Everybody looks good, and so that's what it was. In regards to the quarterback situation, Luke Altmaier, 10 of 14, couple touchdowns, 116 through the air. Donovan Leary, 13 of 23 for 207. So I guess we'll start right there because, of course, Luke Altmaier is a former four-star, and much is expected of him and his continued progression.
Yeah, I mean, we might as well start there because that was kind of all that we have to talk about when it comes to the spring game today. As an Illinois fan, there was a couple questions that you kind of had, which we considered strengths coming in, which was the quarterback position and the running back room, and I guess the offensive line. And watching this game, that today just all kind of confirmed that. We knew Illinois fans were confident in Luke Altmaier's abilities because we saw what happened. Non-Illinois fans, saw John Paddock overtake Luke, and it may have looked a little worse than it really was. Luke was playing just fine as a quarterback. It just so happens that John Paddock went on a complete ringer, like he was just on fire, and Bret Bielema, who was trying to make a bowl game, almost had no choice. It would be hard to bench a guy who just threw for 2 games prior, had a game-winning drive, and then the previous game had a 500 yards for a victory over I don't recall who it is, but
Minnesota.
It's hard to bench. What was that?
Minnesota.
Minnesota was a drive that Paddock came in at the last drive.
Indiana. Wasn't it Indiana?
It might have been Indiana. Yeah.
Game.
My memory fails me right now, but yeah. So again, from the outside, it seems like Luke Altmaier got benched, but it wasn't so much he got benched as much as John Paddock. It's just like you gave him the keys because he was just. Again, I'm a little older, so I don't know where your viewership falls, but for me, it reminded me of when Kurt Warner replaced Trent Green in the NFL, a couple decades back, and it was a backup who was very unassuming, but all of a sudden kept throwing for 300, 400 yards, and you're just wondering who this guy is. And that was kind of who John Paddock ended up being. So this upcoming year, our quarterback room seems pretty solid for us. Like, I've been very confident in Luke Altmaier last year was his first year as a full-time quarterback. This is the first time Bret Bielema is going to have a quarterback returning as a starting quarterback. And he could have, fished the transfer portal if he didn't feel confident in Luke's abilities. And let's be honest. And I know you've been a very vocal component about this. If Luke Altmaier was like a lot of other college players right now, he could have fished for other opportunities at this point. He was a 4-star, as you mentioned. He could have easily been like, look, I was playing fine, and this coaching staff decided to go with someone else. It could have been very easy for Luke to all of a sudden decide, hey, I'm going to enter the transfer portal, and I'm going to try to find other opportunities and play for a different team and, cash in on whatever paychecks. But he didn't. And this offseason, Bret's been very vocal about that. Like Luke, he's been very supportive of the decision that he saw the coaching staff make last year. He learned a lot from John Paddock. He was very supportive of him throughout. And he knows what his faults were last year, which were he was a little more indecisive. He held on to the ball maybe a split second too long, whereas John Paddock, when he was in the game, when you account for his snaps, like his release was as high as any, from snap to release was as quick as any quarterback in the Big Ten. Luke's wasn't. And so he's like, I realized that that's something I have to work on. And the beauty of all this is Luke's got 3 more years of starting if he wants to. And so that's a room that we always thought we'd be pretty confident in. And the other one was his backup. As you kind of mentioned, Donovan Leary. College football fans know the Leary name because his older brother was a very good quarterback for. He just played for Kentucky, and Devin Leary is who I'm referring to. He's got the genes, and he also had a very solid showing today in the spring game. And so for us, it was very comforting that Leary and Altmaier looked very well. You talked about seeing that Bielema press conference. Our secondary is going to have to, fix a few things. And so there's not much to focus on the defensive side. At this point, what we're hoping for coming into the season is a strong quarterback room, a strong running back room, and a strong offensive line. We saw all three of those today. Defensively, we didn't see quite as much, but I don't know if that's just kind of by design, because we had a couple guys in the secondary leave us. And now that transfer portal is open, we're definitely going to be making a strong run towards, shoring up that defensive side.
So, Sonny, is this a bowl team? Is that the aspiration? Obviously, the schedule, which I've looked at in the past, I can't recall it at the top of my head. I actually think this is the big shame about all of this realignment, among other things, is that this program just didn't win a Big Ten West title a couple years ago, but most observers thought they were the best team, including myself. I thought they were the best team in the West that year. Things didn't break the right way, and now there's virtually no chance of ascending to that level, but that's what it is. So you have to readjust the expectations and the hopes.
I mean, you're exactly right. It's we had our chance, 2 seasons ago. Our over under in Vegas is 5.5, and I'm one of the more optimistic Illinois fans you're going to find on whether it's social media or YouTube or whatnot. Even right now, if you asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have leaned over, but we have two weaknesses coming into this upcoming year. And one of them was our defensive line, where I think we legitimately have the guys there, especially some of the guys that we got in the transfer portal. And our secondary, where we didn't necessarily have the guys. And I was kind of hoping that we'd be able to shore up with the transfer portal. But all that's happened is we've lost arguably one of the three best guys that we had in Zachary Tobe. He's going to leave us. And our defensive backs coach, unfortunately, who was just hired, Bret Bielema, just had to replace the guy from the previous year because our secondary was pretty bad last year. So he had to replace our defensive backs coach. And the guy we just hired in about January he just decided he had some medical conditions. He didn't decide. Life decided he had some medical conditions. And so he is no longer employed with the University of Illinois. So Bret has decided that he was going to wait until after spring practices to replace him. Now, when it comes to college football college coaches, Bret has as much of a Rolodex as anybody. He's been in the game a very, very long time. And unlike his predecessor, Lovie Smith, who, hired his son as a assistant coach, who was probably a little underqualified, let's put it kindly. Bret kind of has his choice of whoever he wants to hire, and he's made it pretty clear that despite it being late in the coaching hire cycle, he's had a few candidates who are excitedly reaching out for this position. But the fact that the secondary was already weak coming into the spring game, and one of the main concerns that we've had coming into next year, and now we've lost arguably one of our best guys in the secondary, and now literally the coach who's coaching up that secondary. I'm at the point now where, I'm not as confident as I was before that we'd make a bowl game. Right now, the aspirations, that's it. Let's get us to 6 wins. I know our defense is young. Obviously we're losing Johnny Newton, Keith Randolph, a couple guys on defense this year. The year before, we lost 3 guys in the top 70 picks in the NFL. So Illinois is not a program that's built to just next man up. Illinois is and Bret Bielema in particular is a program builder, where it takes a couple years to couple, recruiting cycles to have the guys ready to play. I don't know if the guys are necessarily ready yet on the secondary side. So I guess we can revisit this conversation in a couple months once I see what that roster looks like. But as of now, if I was in Vegas and I saw that number at 5.5, I'd say that's just about right.
Yes, if anyone's familiar with Johnny Newton, and if you're not, and you're a big college football fan, you probably just missed him because you weren't watching Illinois. Because if you turned on a game for more than like 2 series, he was at some point going to just jump off the screen, even if you're watching the ball. I understand most people are watching the ball, but there's sometimes where a defensive player is just so outstanding for some reason, and he's one of those guys that. I discovered fairly early on a few years ago. And wow, just a force. And you put Randolph into that equation as one of the top players at his position in the Big Ten. And those are losses that this type of program doesn't typically recover from. So that's tough.